la consideración de Singapur. Primera organización.
UNIFU, Singapore Council of Women's Organizations. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. We have a total of 12 NGOs from Singapore that are present this afternoon, and this is the highest number for Singapore since CEDAW was ratified. We're including points from our partners and member organizations, Centre for Fathering, United Women Singapore, SNTUC, and Safe Place. CEDAW has seen progress in the advancement of women's status and well-being in Singapore since our participation at the 85th CEDAW pre-sessional working group in 2022. Despite these positive developments, more still needs to be done. Fundamentally, we must break down the entrenched gender stereotypes and gender norms at home and work. We maintain our recommendation to improve the collection of gender disaggregated data, especially to identify specific areas where women continue to be underrepresented or disadvantaged, and to assess the impact of the measures adopted. The state must implement a zero-tolerance policy on workplace harassment to ensure a safe and dignified work environment for all. Current legislation does not oblige employers to act on workplace harassment. As a society, we need to uproot the deeply ingrained notions that women are not cut out for STEM roles and are the primary household managers and caregivers. Given the rapidly increasing aging population in Singapore, paid family care leave should be introduced to support the caregiving needs of the family. There must be a mindset shift for men to take on an equal role as caregivers. To encourage fathers to play a greater caregiving role, paternity leave and maternity leave should be equalized. Fathers should be allowed to utilize paternity leave during pregnancy to provide greater support. Many single unwed mothers do not receive maintenance for their children, and existing legislation should enforce this strongly. Older women face double discrimination of age and gender, and they have lower retirement savings than men. Older women dominate lower skilled and lower income jobs such as cleaners and laborers. In 2013, 18.6% of all women in such jobs were over 65 years. This number doubled in 2023. Lower earnings results in lower CPF balances, affecting retirement savings. Existing retirement schemes are beneficial, but insufficient to reach retirement adequacy. Gendered ageism must be prevented, and targeted steps must be taken to enable women to remain in or rejoin the workforce with better job opportunities that offer career advancement of older women. We call on the state to provide more resources to companies for job redesign and to re-engineer workplace cultures. It is imperative that flexible work arrangements be legislated and normalized in all Singapore workplaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Next organisation, please.
Stephanie Yuen Teo, SG, Her Empowerment. 2 minutes.
Okay. Madam Chair, good afternoon. Today I highlight the issue of gender-based violence, especially in the virtual world. Online harms are increasingly prevalent and something women across all demographics face. While they can affect both men and women, a majority of such attacks are against women. The explosive rise and adoption of generative AI used to create deepfake pornographic content will make the online world, even less safe. Singapore has made good progress in leveling the playing field for women in the physical world, but attacks in the online space are an emerging danger that need to be addressed urgently. Gender-based violence covers mental, emotional, and sexual abuse. Harms such as cyberbullying, image-based sexual abuse, and cyberstalking can also amount to violence. Such harms negatively impact women's mental health, their well-being, and their safety, which in turn affects gender equality. Online harms do not just affect the direct victims. Online attitudes will spill over into mindsets about gender norms. SHE's research suggests that negative gender bias is developing online. Acceptance of online harms is also becoming more normalized, which has harmful real-life effects as people accustomed to seeing online abuse accept this more readily in the physical world. Technology-facilitated gender-based violence can occur with physical harm. 1/3 of the cases seen at SHE's support center involved both online and physical harms. While the government has taken active steps to regulate online harms, SHE recommends introducing an independent e-safety commission, which will have regulatory powers for rapid harmful content removal, institute policies and legislation, and provide education and training to enhance digital skills. I am also speaking on behalf of United Women Singapore and would like to recognize the importance of changing mindsets to break the cycle of violence against women. UWS's research indicates that this change in mindsets starts at home to build healthy masculinity ideals and not perpetuate gender-based violence. Thank you very much.
Gracias. Siguiente organización.
Thank you. Next organization, please.
Safa Faradilla, Beyond the Hijab and Musawa. 1 minute and a half.
Chair, I read this statement on behalf of Beyond the Hijab and Musawa. Singapore reformed the Administration of Muslim Law Act, AMLA, in 2020. However, AMLA still discriminates against Muslim women. We assert that Singapore's Muslim family laws remain fundamentally patriarchal because polygamy continues to be legal for Muslim men, Muslim women are still required to obtain the approval of their guardian to get married. During divorce, Muslim women face numerous hurdles to access justice due to Sharia courts' lax enforcement mechanisms, and in most instances, a Muslim woman is entitled to only half the inheritance of a man. The government has refused to lift reservations on Articles 2 and 16 by using the excuse that the reservations are to protect the personal and religious rights of minorities. As members of the minority community, we reiterate that justice and equality is inherent in Islam, and Singapore has a duty to protect Muslim women's rights to equality within the family. We recommend the CEDAW committee to urge the state party to lift reservations on Article 2 and 16 of the CEDAW Convention, reform the AMLA with a new framework that grants husband and wife equal rights and responsibilities in marriage, and ensure consultations in the reform process, particularly with diverse Muslim women. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gracias. Siguiente organización.
Thank you. Next organization.
Rabia Hana and Female Genital Cutting. 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm from End Female Genital Cutting Singapore and Equality Now. In Singapore, over 75% of Muslim women have undergone Type 1 and 4 FGC, with varied techniques and equipment used by doctors. The risks are infections and long-term desensitization of the clitoris. Despite ongoing advocacy, the government have yet to enact regulations to end the practice. Our recommendations are: undertake comprehensive measures to raise awareness of and eliminate FGC within Singapore. Ensure survivors have access to medical, psychological, and mental health care and support services. Third, implement legal and policy measures to prevent and address the practice of FGC in Singapore. Thank you.
Siguiente organización.
Thank you. Next organization, please.
Haslina Abdul Halim, Singapore Muslim Women's Association. 1 minute and a half.
PPIS is as concerned about patriarchy regaining ground as earlier observed in the opening remarks. We share apprehensions on misappropriating religion. It cannot be used to abuse. Women must not be disadvantaged by our cultural identities. PPIS's research on the aspirations of Singapore Muslim women found family and faith to be the core tenets of her aspirations. It also revealed top challenges: negative stereotypes, limited career advancement, lack of leadership representation, and religious concerns. In Singapore, there is a lack of quantitative data to better understand us, Muslim women, and the systemic barriers causing unique challenges. Ergo, PPIS calls for more data sharing and granularity, specifically to disaggregate data into subgroups to ensure equal access to support and resources for women. It is pivotal for Muslim women to have a deeper understanding of the AMLA, especially for estate planning to mitigate discrimination. Re-education of roles in Muslim marriages is also vital to catalyzing balanced partnership, and intervention must keep going upstream. We call for state agencies and religious or faith-based bodies to increase engagement with NGOs moving forward for a stronger pulse on the ground. We must all work together for the betterment of Muslim women by adopting a gendered lens on how society allocates resources and invests in women. PPIS does more than advocating for Muslim women in Singapore. We serve to build a community of successful women and thriving families. Muchas gracias.
Siguiente organización, por favor.
Thank you. Next organization, please.
Haya Anil Kumar, Humanitarian Organization for Migration Economics. 2 minutes.
Chair, I will raise 3 issues as regards migrant domestic workers in Singapore. First, pregnancy. It is currently illegal for a female migrant worker, including migrant domestic workers, to become pregnant. They are subject to 6 monthly medical examinations, which test for pregnancies, the results of which are reported to the authorities. Pregnant domestic workers face termination, repatriation, and may be blacklisted from future employment. As a result, they may resort to unsafe methods of abortion, such as consuming illegal abortion pills. Thus, the prohibition against pregnancy for female migrant workers should be removed. Issue number 2, exclusion from Employment Act and lack of rest. Domestic workers remain excluded from the Employment Act, which covers basic rights, including working hour limits. While employers are required to provide adequate food and rest, these vague standards often translate into living and working standards being determined by individual employers due to the inequality in bargaining powers. Sufficient rest is crucial for domestic workers who live and work within their employers' homes. However, weekly rest days are not guaranteed for domestic workers, as regulations only mandate 1 rest day a month that cannot be financially compensated. Rest days are also not defined as 24 continuous hours, which can result in work done on rest days with no compensation. The Employment Act should be expanded to cover domestic workers, and the frequency of mandatory rest days should be increased to weekly. All rest days should be defined as 24 continuous hours. Third issue, lack of job mobility. Employers have the unilateral right to cancel a domestic worker's employment and repatriate them. Domestic workers do not have the right to switch employers freely and require the consent of their current employers even upon the expiry of their work permit terms. Labor constraints cause domestic workers to stay in highly exploitative situations and not report violations. They should be allowed to change employers with clearly defined notice period that both employer and employee should adhere to. Thank you.
Siguiente organización.
Thank you. Next organization.
Anik Go Sayoni. 2 minutes.
Chair, Sayoni's research found 3 pressing issues affecting LGBTI women. Censorship. Infocom Media Development Authority is the statutory board under the Ministry of Communications and Information. Under the content codes, it continued to categorize homosexuality together with practices such as pedophilia, bestiality, incest, necrophilia, and sexual violence that dehumanize and vilify LGBTI persons. Sayoni recommends that the government take concrete measures towards ratifying media policies and practices to equalize the treatment of heterosexual and LGBTI content in order to eliminate stereotypes that stigmatize and discriminate against LGBTI women, violence and discrimination of LGBTI students. LGBTI students in Singapore experience homophobic and transphobic bullying and discrimination. LGBTI students must fit into the stereotype or face rejection, punishment, or bullying from their peers and school system. Transgender students were denied their right to education and sent home on numerous occasions. A school counselor from a top school went to a school assembly with the presentation that stated 1 in 15 homosexuals are pedophiles, and 58% of homosexuals have intestinal wounds. Sayoni recommends that the government provide a timeline for implementation of a clear policy supporting LGBTQ students and to include diversity training as part of the National Institute of Education's teacher training program. Workplace discrimination. Despite rampant workplace discrimination against LGBTI women, no legal framework exists to explicitly protect LGBTI persons against discrimination in a workplace based on sexual orientation or gender identity expression. The state continues to exclude LGBTI persons in the workplace fairness registration. SIONI recommends that the government includes LGBTI persons in the workplace fairness registration. Thank you.
La última organización.
Last organization, please.
Corina Lim, Association of Women for Action and Research. 2 minutes.
While Singapore has made much progress since the last CEDAW session, significant gaps persist. We will focus on issues relating to single unwed mothers and migrant spouses. Children born out of wedlock are legally labeled as illegitimate in Singapore. Single unwed parents, who are mainly women, receive less child-related financial support and tax reliefs than their married counterparts. This is harsh for unwed mothers who, on top of societal stigma, struggle with the double burden of caregiving and breadwinning. We ask that child-related benefits be equalized for unwed parents. Unwed mothers and their children face housing insecurity because our housing policies do not recognize them as a family nucleus. These policies limit their access to affordable public housing, causing stress and hardship. We call for the state to redefine family nucleus to include unwed parents and their children, and also to remove the repugnant concept of illegitimacy from Singapore law. Next, migrant spouses. Migrant spouses are marginalized due to their gender, nationality, ethnicity, and class. The criteria to obtain long-term visit passes, permanent residency, and Singapore citizenship are vague. Reasons for rejection are not transparent, causing frustration and uncertainty. Migrant spouses on LTVP passes depend on the Singaporean spouse to sponsor their stay in the country. This power imbalance and the risk of being separated from their children makes them highly vulnerable to domestic violence and exploitation. To address this, the state should, 1, publish clear eligibility criteria and timeframes for residency for migrant spouses. 2, allow abused migrant spouses to renew LTVP passes on their own. Thank you very much.
A todas las organizaciones de Singapur por su valiosa.
Thank you for all the NGOs from Singapore for their valuable information. We now move